Welcome back to the LoCo Experience podcast. My guest today is Alex Raymond, and Alex is the founder of the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit coming up in May. We'll talk more about that. He's the host of the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast, as well as the founder of a business called Amplify, and he's been involved with TechStars, mostly in the Boulder area, for a long time in various capacities. So long list of titles and accomplishments there, Mr. Raymond. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Kurt. Great to see you.
So I guess let's start with the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit. When is it? Who should go? What's it cost? Who will they see there? How long you been doing it? All that.
Yeah,
stuff.
let's start with Conscious Entrepreneur. And actually what I'll do is link it back to something you just mentioned in the introduction, which is TechStars.
Yeah.
So I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, primarily in the software space. And when I say a long time, I mean it. Like 15,
Well, you're pretty old.
15 years.
Yeah.
I just turned 49 last month.
All right.
And so for probably 15, 16, 17 years, I've been an entrepreneur, which, as you know, has pros and cons. Many years ago, I started a company called Capta, and we got into the TechStars program in Boulder.
Okay. Yep.
Back when TechStars was really cool.
Right.
Now it's kind of cool, but it used to be really cool.
Well, it's coming back. It seems like it's
coming
getting
back.
cooler.
Correct.
It's a resurrecting brand.
So we were going through the program, and just so that your listeners know, TechStars is one of these startup accelerators,
Yep.
and it's one of the original ones. It's been around for a while, but really well established, really well known, very beneficial program, like tons, really valuable. And it's a big deal to get into.
Do they bring capital to the equation as well?
They do.
So if you get into the program, we'll pick the cool kids, and maybe we'll even invest in you if we think you get cool enough and smart enough, fast enough.
Totally. So there's an application process. It's pretty lengthy, pretty involved. They select a very small percentage of whoever applies, and then when you apply, you get funding. So you get kind of this equity grant in exchange for part of your company. So when we did it, it was something like $100,000 for 6% of the company.
Okay,
that's their business model, right?
I would make that trade right now.
So they take equity in your company in return for you going through the program, and they invest a small amount as well so that you have capital.
Yeah.
But on top of that, then they open up other funding facilities so you can have access to convertible debt notes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so it's a great program. A lot of people are excited to be in it. It's a big deal. It's prestigious, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I was going through this program, and there's like maybe 12 other companies or 11 other companies in the program itself. Everyone at various stages of how far along they are, from like very, very little to, at that point, my company, I think we were probably one of the farther along. We were doing like maybe $250,000 a year in revenue or something like that.
In software as a service?
Yeah. Right. So the company I was with at the time was software as a service, and a lot of companies are sort of tech in one form or another.
Sure.
So it could be apps or fintech or software, or what have you.
The TechStars.
Hence the name. Yeah. And so I was going through the program.
Okay.
And it's structured. There's a lot of mentors. There's a lot of support. There's a lot of people out there kind of designed to be helping you. And one day I'm back at home in the evening, and I'm sitting on a couch, kind of like this one, and I've got this look on my face that my wife calls my fish face.
Okay.
Fish face meaning like it's kind of droopy. I'm not looking very excited.
Yeah.
Like I got something on my mind. And she looks over at me and she's like, "Why do you have that fish face?" Like, and then she followed up with like, "Why are you so miserable?" And I was like, "Wait a minute."
Okay.
Huh? She goes, "You're supposed to be." She's like,
You're
"I
an
can
entrepreneur, damn
You're
it."
supposed to be at the height of your entrepreneurial career. You just got into TechStars. You have all these people supporting you. You just raised some money. All these things are happening in your life. Why are you so fucking miserable?" Like, fair question, right? And it was kind of like a whack on the head.
Yeah.
Right. And after I got over my initial defensiveness, right? I was like, oh. Once I got over my initial defensiveness, and I started to think, what is going on? Like, yes, why am I unhappy? Why do I feel unsatisfied? Why am I miserable?
Yeah.
What I realized, Kurt, was I was spending all this time that I was in the program comparing myself to everybody else.
Yeah.
hey, this guy's farther along because of this. This person's farther along
His
because of that.
margins are so
Oh,
much better.
these people have more money. They raised more money than we did. Oh, they have a sexier app. They have a this. They have a that. They have a bigger team. They have a marquee mentor. Whatever it is, right? And I was like giving away all my energy into this like doom loop spiral.
Yeah.
I don't belong here. I feel like an imposter. I just snuck in. When are they going to find out that I don't really belong?
Yeah.
You know, all these sort of stories in my
Yeah,
head.
yeah. Most
And
entrepreneurs have been there.
so a lot of entrepreneurs have been there. So here's how this kind of evolved for me was, went on with building the business, but I had this thought in my head that like, hey, I can do better here. Like it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to feel this way. And so as we built that business, we went through a number of different stages, and we raised money and hired a team, and then shifted and fired a bunch of
Made
people.
revenues.
Had revenue
Lost
and then
them.
and lost them, and customer, up and down and sideways and so on. But along the way, I kept on this journey to really understand and explore what was going on inside of me, what was going on in my head, what was going on in my heart, what was going on in my body, as it relates to being an entrepreneur.
And I know we just talked about we're going to, come to our faith family politics segment later, but like what was your faith perspective? Were you also like learning about meditation or Buddhism or
Sure.
Taoism or
Yeah.
something at the same time? Like, or was that the instigator to that for you?
I basically did everything.
Right.
So
threw
everything that
on
there
the
was,
wall.
everything that there was to do, I
Went
did.
to church, synagogue.
I mean, at this point, I had done the meditation programs, and I had done the retreats and read the books and watched the videos. I even spent months at an ashram in India.
Okay.
So my wife had gone to an ashram in India a long time ago. She went for 6 months. I went and joined her for 3 months. So that was a big part of it. Is like, how can I use the tools I already know to quiet my mind or to still my mind or to understand what's going on?
Yeah.
So that was
Sorry
definitely
to
a
jump
thing.
in, but I just
No.
felt like it was part of that exploratory for you, at least.
It was a thing. And I also then tried to tap into local resources. So I joined entrepreneur groups and a men's group and
1 million cups or
all,
different
all
things.
this sort of stuff. So like it was EO Accelerator at the time because we were sub $1 million. So we had EO Accelerator.
Yeah.
And I joined a men's group. And then I had my own sort of like gaggle of entrepreneurs, and we would get together every couple of weeks and talk about stuff. And so this was all part of me tapping into whatever is out there, trying to help get support for myself.
Yeah.
Then I became a mentor in the TechStars program.
Okay.
So one of the things they do
You
is
had
they have
reached
all these
some measure of success through this. You
Right,
weren't
and, like,
rich yet, but
people-
you were figuring it out.
And it's basically people who can be helpful to entrepreneurs at some point in their journey. So since I'd gone through and survived the program and raised money and we started building a business, it was like, great, I could be of help to people who are a year or two behind. Okay, great. And I would go to all these mentor meetings, and people would come to me thinking that they wanted to talk about their pricing strategy or their go-to-market strategy
Right.
or how to build the website or how to do a sales deck or enterprise sale, whatever, something like this, right?
Totally.
And so
And you're
everyone's,
like, what do you really want to do?
well, everyone's very serious, right? They're all very serious, and they want to talk about their go-to-market strategy. But what I realized was they all just wanted they wanted an answer to the question of, when am I going to start feeling better inside? Right?
Yeah.
And a lot of entrepreneurs just didn't have the vocabulary. They didn't have the awareness. They didn't have permission to talk about stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because think about it. Like, you're building a business, there's a very specific playbook. You find a problem, you investigate the problem, you have a solution, you raise money, you staff up, you go solve it, you scale up,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
everyone's a gajillionaire and happy ever after. Right?
It
except
rarely goes that way.
except it doesn't really look like that for most people, right? For most
Yeah.
people, it looks like this blah, 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 like kind of bouncing around, and there's a lot of stuff that's driving you.
Yeah.
So fears and limiting beliefs and whatever you got left over from your childhood and all this
Sure.
kind of stuff. So I'm still answering the first question on why conscious entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So here's how it emerged. I realized, everyone else wants to talk about this stuff too.
Yeah.
And none of the things that I found around me were particularly suited in the way that I wanted, but it was important to realize I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And all these people are also looking for some type of community. So in the summer of 2021, during mid-pandemic.
Yeah.
I was out walking my dog.
Just getting ready to come back into lockdown again.
Quite. We didn't
Or
know that yet.
Maskies or
We didn't know
whatever.
that yet.
Yeah. It seemed like we were done with it finally.
I have a miniature schnauzer. Her name is Dash.
I've got a Schnauzer Cocker. Schnocker.
Yeah. Nice. So I was out walking Dash, and just as we were rounding the corner on 26th Street, coming back toward my house in Boulder, I had one of these, kind of like epiphanies in my mind. And the epiphany in my mind went, boy, I really like being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I really like all this personal growth stuff that I've been working on and doing. And even though I'm an introvert, I actually really like putting on conferences.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
And so basically it was like this Venn diagram of these three things, like boom, 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 all coming together. And literally, you know how sometimes as an entrepreneur, there's something that you can't not do?
Yeah. Podcasting for me is one of those.
So this is what it was for me. It was, okay, this is going to happen. There's going to be an event for entrepreneurs who are dedicated to their personal growth. And somehow this is going to come to life. And I guess I'm the one who's going to be doing this. So
what do we got to do?
off we go, right? Like what's next?
Yeah.
And that was the origin of it. So that was in the summer of 2021. The first event took place in May of 2022.
Okay.
So I had like 9 or 10 months to put it together. But the
So
thesis,
this would be a third year event?
this is year 4.
4. Oh, yeah. 22, 23, 24, 25 already.
Mm-hmm.
Dang.
Yeah. So the thesis of the event is that growth starts from within, and that there are ways to build a business and to scale a business without sacrificing yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I resonate in part. I'm actually reflecting to our Next Level Summit last summer, and part of the talk from our one of our facilitators was kind of this concentric circle of, kind of focus on yourself first and be thoughtful about where that growth is happening, and then now your business, and then now let's take it out to the community, and where are you engaging in the community, and in what capacities, where are your special powers and things like that.
Totally.
So, like, when you talk about working on yourself, like, it sounds like so many different things, right? It's like your relationships, your gym, your physical health, your food intake, all the stuff. Is that, or is it more businessy focused on that entrepreneur role? Who is coming for this?
Conscious Entrepreneur Summit. The answer is in the name. It's for the person on the website. It's for the founder. It's for the person in the arena.
Yeah.
Right. That's who we're focusing on. While we welcome other people, like maybe the COO or the so on. Like, for the most part, these are founders, CEOs, the person who is the entrepreneur. And we all have this perception that being an entrepreneur is just nonstop hustle, nonstop success. Everything is up and to the right, and so on. And when you get into it, and a lot of entrepreneurs here in Colorado,
Sure.
like when you get into it, so many people, they may not be open to telling you about this, but maybe they're having issues with their health or their marriage, or they're unhappy for multiple reasons, or they're internalizing so much stress, anxiety, fear, etc. And we need a place to release that. We as entrepreneurs often can't go to our spouses and have the same level of conversation.
Yeah.
We can't go to our team and have that same level of conversation because it sets the team off, right? Like,
well, and plus, they don't want to know you're going to have trouble making payroll next month.
They don't want to know.
They shouldn't have to know.
It doesn't land very well. And by the way, it's also not that helpful if you're the CEO to go to your team members and say, "Oh, I'm having all these doubts about X, Y, Z." right?
Totally.
So,
no, you have to be that. Frankly, I just wanted to share some resonance, I guess.
Yeah.
LoCo Think Tank is local community think tank, but it's also make you crazy if you don't talk to somebody about your challenges in creating this business that you're building.
Totally.
Or make your spouse crazy if you bring them all your challenges that you can't talk with your team about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so because of that, a lot of people just clam up and they don't talk.
Yeah, they just work harder at the problem without any perspective. And so that's like we're doing the same thing in different ways, I guess, is some ways how I would say it.
Yeah, and that's why I'm here to share these stories.
Fair enough.
So people get, like the pressure just builds internally. And unfortunately, there's a lot of stories
I
about.
recruited my marriage counselor to my second LoCo think tank chapter, actually.
Nice.
He
There you
became
go.
a member. He was scaling his counseling practice at the time.
And
And
you're
so it
like,
was kind of like I could keep going to counseling because I couldn't really afford it. But as long as he was a member, I was like, well, he's kind of paying me to go
right.
see him. That's good.
And so
So, yes, I understand is what I mean to say by that.
well, you understand, like you get it. And if we don't have a place to share, if we don't have community, if we don't have people we can talk to about this stuff, the pressure builds up, and then lo and behold, you've got an illness, or you've got some issue with your health, or with your family, or with your whatever, or you're exploding in
All
your
the
temper,
things.
or stress,
Yeah.
stress, whatever. And these things can kill. And unfortunately, there's also stories about entrepreneurs who take their own lives, for example.
Sure.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And like nothing.
Probably at a much higher level than the general public.
Well,
I'm sure.
there's a lot of data on this, right?
Yeah.
So Dr. Michael Freeman has done a lot of research on entrepreneur mental health, on entrepreneur resilience, and entrepreneurs have a lot of very pro growth capacities,
Yeah.
right? Like we're creative and we're industrious and we fix problems and we're social, etc.
Meritocracy generally and stuff like that.
And we have a lot of negative orientations
Oh, yeah.
as well: depression, stress.
You're never where you want to be by now.
All of these things, right? And so it's a real thing. And what we've done with Conscious Entrepreneur Summit is create a place where people can not only connect with one another, but then learn tools and ideas and resources.
Okay.
So we bring in, it's a very, very high quality event. This is, we bring in incredible speakers. We've had people like Gay Hendricks, the guy who wrote all about Zone of Genius, who invented Zone of Genius. Keith Ferrazzi, the guy who wrote Never Eat Alone.
Okay.
Ryan Holiday, who wrote all those books
Awesome
on Stoics. Liz Fosline, who does all this work on emotions at work.
Okay.
Kaylee Klemp, one of the co-authors of the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. So we have really, really
Talk about people you actually pay to come.
serious people. Correct? Yeah, yes,
Big money.
big time. And this year we're bringing in Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who is the co-author of a book, well, many books, but the one that really attracted me was this book called 10X is Easier Than 2X. Have you read it?
I've heard about it, but I haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
No.
Super book, and it's really about it's not about hey, if you want to grow 10X, you need to raise your price or sell more products or go enterprise or whatever. It's not that. It's here's the psychology of what it takes to think and become the person who's going to grow like this, as opposed to the person who's going to grow like that.
Yeah.
So really, really
It's the
interesting.
mindset shift
It's
necessary.
all the
to
mindset shift.
allow for that, which then can allow you to explore the systems, the processes, the sales literature,
Correct.
whatever that is for your business.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, really great gang. It's coming up May 28th and 29th in Boulder, Colorado. We'll have a couple hundred people there.
Right after the Memorial Day weekend.
Yep.
So what is that, a Thursday, Friday?
So Wednesday, Thursday.
Wednesday, Thursday? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So sign up through early
Everything you
May.
want and more is on the website at consciousentrepreneur.us. I realize that those are two very difficult words to spell, conscious and entrepreneur. You put them together, it's even harder to spell.
Ask your Google if you need
And
to.
we don't even have the .com, it's a .us. But if you Google any sort of approximation,
close.
it will find us.
So, how has the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit evolved over now? It's coming into its fourth year. Easier to get cool speakers, probably because you've had cool speakers before.
Yeah. So the evolution has been, so several things are going on. We have consistently been able to attract good speakers because we pay for the ones that we want. But I've also learned about how to create a really great event.
Yeah.
So in the past, my bias on this, Kurt, was I'm just going to get as many cool speakers and we're going to fill the day and it's going to be like a fire hose of information from the stage and everyone's going to say rah, rah, and then be done. And what I realized over time, like the feedback I was getting from people was like, hey, this is really great. And we would like a lot more space in the day to connect with one another.
Yeah.
And then, so great. So then we created more space in the day to connect with one another. Guess what they said after that? Oh, we'd like more space to connect with one another during the day. And so we're building in, the way I think about it is a hierarchy. And the hierarchy that I use to run the summit is connection at the top, event, or experience,
Okay.
and then content at the bottom.
Oh, interesting.
So in the past, I would have said, let's put content at the top
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
blast the content. Now I've realized that what entrepreneurs value most is connecting with others and sharing their journey.
Yeah.
So if we can build in experiences like we do connection dinners, so community organized connection dinners around a specific theme. We do a connection hike where everyone gets out in nature.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and walks around and connects that way. And those things, and plus, whatever workshops or things we're organizing during the summit itself, they allow people to open up, to be vulnerable, to create connection, to meet new people, to network a little bit, and so on. So we do a lot more of that than we have in the past.
What's your venue?
The venue,
way.
we're at the University of Colorado
Okay.
in the Glenn Miller Ballroom at the UMC. So it's
one big room.
It's one big.
kinda?
So it's one big room. So my other philosophy on this is, I like groupism,
Yeah.
and I like everyone together for the entire thing. So we
Yeah.
don't break up. We don't split up
There's
into
not speakers over here and speakers over there and
No.
choose your journey.
No,
Interesting.
we're doing it. So I'm a little bit of a control freak in that regard, but we do it all together because that way we can really build a fantastic experience and arc for everybody.
Very cool.
As opposed to, I went to this one, I went to that one, I didn't meet you yet, I haven't seen you before. Where it gets really diluted. I try to keep everything together.
Yeah. It sounds like a pretty interesting, and like you can literally like hike out the back door and
Yeah.
go for a
Right.
cruise.
Yeah. So it's like the most amazing scenery in the world right outside the door.
Who's your demographic? Are you like half Boulder, Denver region, and then half people from around the country, or is it
Yeah. So
way
we
different than that? I don't...
we typically get about 75% of our audience from Colorado.
Okay.
And 25% from not. So we've already had some international visitors. People flew in from London and Mexico and Spain. So we've had some amount of non-U.S. folks, Canada, of course, but mostly Colorado. And then people who are like really interested in these topics come from other parts of the U.S. Yeah. And within Colorado, it's going to be mostly Denver and Boulder. Yeah.
Right. And is it mostly also kind of that tech-oriented software, banky stuff?
Well, that's where it's
or
interesting.
Is it also now
it's not
like manufacturers of Windows or sign companies?
It's exceedingly diverse. And that's an awesome thing about it.
Yeah.
So what I mean is you're going to find everything from, software or fintech, kind of thing, which you might think of more traditional entrepreneurs.
Sure.
That's kind of what comes to mind. To people who are
At
doing
least funded entrepreneurs.
Yeah, but we also have people who are doing consulting companies, people who are doing manufacturing, people doing healthcare. People. There was one year some people came who run a franchise of like swim clubs for kids.
Yeah.
We have people from the construction business. So it's pretty broad. And here's why. It's broad because there's so many commonalities for entrepreneurs in their experience, no matter what industry they're in. So as a founder in tech, I have more in common with a founder in healthcare than I do with someone else in tech.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Who's not a founder. And so that's the bond. Like that's the glue.
Fair. Okay. So it's especially founders, like
correct.
Not necessarily second generation, not necessarily. I mean, that's because that is like if you were handed the keys to something, you just got to drive it in a way. But being the founder comes with its own special set of challenges.
Correct. Yeah. So it's
doubts.
very much the founders, and that allows us to really talk to them. Right. So it's highly focused content, experience, and connections.
Fair enough. Should we shift to the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast?
We can talk about the podcast. The podcast is an effort to broaden the conversation. So
and when did you start?
About a year and a half ago. I think I'm 75, 76
Oh, wow,
episodes
you're crushing them out. So you're one a week. Pretty much.
Yeah. It's a
bit of a slog.
It's a lot of work.
Do you love it?
It's a lot of work. There are parts that I love, and there are parts that I'm like, ugh. Let me tell you. I mean, so you do podcast. You know all about this.
Yeah.
The parts that I love are the interviews and learning something new and finding really cool people to talk to. The parts that I don't like as much, actually, the one part I really don't like, which is writing the intro and then recording the intro. For some reason, it drives me nuts. I'm always putting it off.
I shrunk mine way down this year. I'm just gonna do like a 8-line, 2-paragraph
Totally.
introduction. And if people want to listen to this person, they should listen. But I don't want to like try to think back
Yeah.
to 3 weeks ago when I interviewed this
Because
person.
you got it, and
tell
plus
them
you got to
what
get
we
everything
learned.
in one take, and it's got to be perfect, and you got to have the right energy and inflections and intonations. Anyway, that part I'm always just like, oh,
Who else could do this for
yeah.
me?
But I do have a great partner
Okay.
with the podcast, which is Sarah Lockwood at Hivecast. She does.
Okay,
Her
so she's
company,
like a production company
her company
to
does all this stuff
support.
for me, which
Sweet.
I'm super glad for. So they take a lot
Sarah,
of it
what's
out.
up?
Hey Sarah, what's up? She does a lot of great stuff for us.
Awesome. So like, what are you trying to achieve? Is it really just a voice for that Conscious Entrepreneur Summit, or are you trying to just take your voice farther away than people that would come to the summit that you're organizing?
Yeah, so it actually serves multiple purposes, the podcast. So
Okay.
the podcast serves one purpose of just broadening the message around conscious entrepreneurship. So
Yeah.
broadly, because people hear it and they make a lot of assumptions. I'll tell you, the one assumption they make is if it's got the word conscious in it, it's for a bunch of barefoot hippie people
Oh,
who are not serious.
I forgot to offer. We always have I got a joint, a homegrown joint right there if you want, and there's also a mushroom in the bottom of that little can.
Thank you.
Because you're hippie, right? Like you're
Well,
conscious entrepreneur.
Thank you for that. I'm a conscious entrepreneur, and I drove here, so I think
Right.
I will pass.
I thought you would,
But being Colorado, I think
if
it's
we were in
well
your
played.
backyard
Well played.
instead of my backyard,
Yeah.
then you would perhaps
Maybe.
indulge.
Correct.
So anyway, I digress. I think it's just kind of a funny thing to offer the community,
Sure.
and you never know.
You never know.
Usually go about 9 weeks between.
And by the way,
anybody-
help yourself.
No, I'm okay. I'm okay.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. though.
You polish off your drink. Do you need a second drink?
Not yet, because I had a little splash before you got here.
Got it.
Like, and so there's.
Otherwise, your voice will start to slur a little bit.
I hear myself. Like, do you hear yourself slur when you've been drinking?
I drink very little, but I
So,
do. Yes.
You have,
Yeah,
and
sure.
you do.
Mhm.
I think there's, like, I do too, and I'm a like a 4% slur right now. Just because I've had 2 whiskeys, and not big whiskeys, but small whiskeys in the last hour,
Mm.
and I can hear it. And so whenever I hear it, I'm like, nope,
I'm good.
I'm good.
I'll have some water
You
instead.
know, and it doesn't take much. Like
Yeah.
like nobody would notice my slur right now.
You
Well,
think?
I think. But a lot of people wouldn't notice their own slurs. Is
Right.
the thing.
Right.
Like, and that's the dangerous thing. If you can notice your own slur, I think you're not quite.
I used to drink. Like any, whatever, in my 20s and whatever. I just used to drink like anybody else, and I essentially, because I started doing a lot of meditating, and I told you I was in this ashram in India. There was a time during the ashram in India. Well, first there was no alcohol while we were there, fine. But then when we were doing other programs kind of around it, there were all these rules, and one of the rules for a decent amount of time, I think it was 100 days, was no meat and no alcohol.
Oh wow.
And at first I was like,
Which
right,
one?
right.
Which one bothered you more?
Both. And I was like, and then once I did it, I was like, oh, that was
not
easy.
hard.
And
Yeah.
by the way, day 101 is a lot easier to tack on after you've done it for 100
Sure.
days. So that led to me being like not eating meat for probably another 2 years
Oh,
or
wow.
3 years after that. And then alcohol, probably also. And then, it came back a bit, but it is not playing a significant role at all
Yeah.
in my
Interesting.
life anymore. So I probably now drink 3 to 4 units
Yeah.
a month.
Okay.
So
Like a glass of wine with dinner once in a while.
like actually what I most like is tequila and mezcal.
Oh.
Yeah, my wife's from Mexico, so we spend a ton of time in Mexico, and that's like I love it.
I do have the anejo of
Mm-hmm.
that Boulder-based brand of tequila. If you'd like just a little tiny sipper, so no, that's an opportunity because we are on the LoCo Experience podcast.
Indeed, yes. Well, I support local businesses as well.
And what is that brand?
It's called
Ava?
Suerte.
Suerte. Yeah. Actually, one of our chapters launched with Suerte, like sponsored, I guess, an event we had, and it was, what was it? It was called Tips, Tacos, and Tequila. And so we had business tips from yours truly.
Mm-hmm.
We had tacos from the Huli and Juan, who were on my podcast a few months ago.
Nice.
And we had tequila from Suerte.
Right.
And Melissa, with an unusual spelling, was our sponsor for that. And she did a really nice talk about how Suerte was like smoking their
Oh, cool.
agave
Yeah.
hearts before they turned it into tequila, and that was why it tasted that much better.
Right.
So anyway, that's like 6 years ago in May.
It was a while ago. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. Anyway, I digress. Sorry to change. That's what we do here. We chase squirrels.
We chase squirrels.
We chase squirrels. Talk to me about while we're still on the topic
Yeah.
of self-destructive behaviors or enlightening behaviors, perhaps.
Sure.
Talk to me about your relationship with both mushrooms and marijuana in light of that.
Yeah, I'm lucky insofar as I didn't do very much marijuana in college,
Okay.
and I consider myself lucky for that because
Yeah.
yeah,
It's better for people.
Yeah,
Like
it's better for
people
people.
that started smoking marijuana before 15, 16 especially.
yeah,
Eh,
not so great.
not usually.
But I did
After 20, better.
I did smoke in my 20s, and it got to the point where like I realized that this just wasn't fun. It wasn't good for me.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thing that I was enjoying, but I still found myself. It was like a default behavior,
Yeah.
and
Plus, you were hanging out with hippies, and you're in Boulder.
plus just
right?
like no, I mean,
really.
I've not given you my whole history.
We'll
and
come back
tour.
to it.
We'll come back to that. But there was a time right before my 30th birthday where I essentially was like, this is not an appropriate thing for me to be continuing. I don't like it. I don't know why I'm
Yeah.
doing this all the time. And so I literally did the proverbial take my stash, flush it down the toilet.
Really?
Yeah. And not to say that I've never gone back. I have, but every time I do anything,
Pretty much
edibles
your
or whatever,
relationship was done
I'm like,
the time.
yeah, it doesn't make me feel great.
Yeah.
Mushrooms, psychedelics, on the other hand, I'm a huge fan.
Okay.
I think these are incredible, powerful tools. I don't do these things in social recreational settings.
Yeah.
I just don't. Like
It's
I'm not interested.
More of a guided
It's-
introspective.
I do it
kind of
in
a
ceremonial setting. I do it internally, laying on a couch, eye folds on, boom, like that whole thing. Much more significant dosage, as opposed to like go concert, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
That part I've got zero interest in.
thing. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Yeah, for sure.
I find that's part of why I put those there in my little dinosaurs, because I
Yeah.
think it's really interesting. Well, Colorado obviously being like the first
We can
state
talk about
to
these
really
things.
rock it.
Yes.
And in the mushrooms too.
Yeah.
But I haven't had mushrooms on the podcast for 2 years. Nobody's taken me up on.
Well, I mean, look, they're a really, really powerful tool.
They are.
And for me, anytime I've done a micro of mushrooms, I get all agitated and irritated.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Like so.
Oh, so you're
I'm
like
"Ugh."
big or nothing. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Some people really like the microdose.
Yeah. Because that's what mostly I've done, like since those early 20s days when I would like see streaks and colors and stuff. But to mine, in inspection, like a little bit is like, the green's just a little bit greener,
Sure.
the sun's just a little bit warmer,
Right.
and you don't actually have a change to your behavior quotient, so it's pretty fun. But for you, it's like annoying because you're
Yeah,
not far enough, or
It's just like
it's just
I'm
out of
slightly
consciousness.
heightened and I'm
Yeah.
slightly like aware and I'm slightly irritated and I was just,
yeah.
like I did it several times and I was just like I'm done. I don't need to do this.
So you're like, I'll just hero dose and
Yeah.
talk on the couch to somebody.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. In fact, many of my experiences for this happened in Arvada at Ceremonia. Have you been there?
No.
Oh,
I don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
anything about it.
It's a psychedelic church.
Oh.
And
I bought some mushrooms at a psychedelic church in Oakland.
okay, so it's a psychedelic
couple
church
years ago.
just down the street in Arvada, Colorado, run by Austin Mao. He's actually been on my podcast. He's
I've
been
heard
a
of that
speaker. He's been a
person.
speaker at my events. Super great guy and someone dedicated to helping people transform their lives by seeing and learning things that you get on a psychedelic
Well, and
experience.
one thing I've noticed from both my own observation as well as listening to a lot of podcasts and stuff is that it's one of the real things that can bust you out of a rut.
Totally.
Like whether it's PTSD or depression because you think you suck as an entrepreneur, or different things. Like a lot of people have used it as that kind of lever that gets them out of a stuck spot.
Yeah. I mean, you know the expressions about like ski grooves in the mind, right? Like
Yeah.
we're always chasing these same thoughts.
We do wear those tracks.
We have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. 90 to 95% of them are the exact same thought as yesterday. Most of them are not positive because we tend to be negatively oriented because that's what keeps us alive. Therefore, I'm thinking 40,000 negative thoughts a day, and they're the same thoughts every single day.
Right.
That creates a lot of super powerful connections in my brain. And what the psilocybin does is it disorganizes my brain and allows all sorts of new information to start flowing around.
It's like fresh pow pow.
It's exactly like fresh powder, and it allows me to then reconsider. And it doesn't mean that I'm never going to have some type of fear or anxiety or worry, but I can then see stuff and say, well, is this thought really true?
Yeah.
Right. And that's incredibly powerful because then I can interrogate my own mind and say,
Intriguing.
based on this information, how do I want to show up in the world?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to chase the squirrel back onto the tree.
Sure.
What is Amplify?
Oh,
You have another
yeah.
operating business
I have
right now.
I have a business
doing
called
stuff.
Amplify. We just started it in October, so like 4 months ago.
All right.
Amplify is a professional development community for a very specific set of people. So the very specific set of people is B2B, post-sales account managers. So
Interesting.
let's say I'm I'm IBM, right?
Yeah.
I probably have
Yeah.
CSU is probably a client of IBM, or they're a client of Google or AWS or whatever, right?
Yep.
And AWS or Google or IBM will have a whole team of post-sales people whose job it is to make sure that CSU is happy,
They stay that way.
They keep buying their stuff. They're aware of the new releases. They buy new things when it's appropriate. They're not looking at the competitors, and so on. So there's a whole world out there, people called account managers. This happens to be a world that I've been working in for a long time. And I realized that there's basically nowhere for them to go get support, get training.
If you're a CFO or a CEO, you got lots of resources.
You got a
For
lot
just
of resources.
regular old account manager.
They
good
don't,
luck.
right? And so
See how you do.
within a typical company, who's getting training? The sales team's getting training, the marketing team's getting training, and the account managers are literally like sitting at the back row,
Right.
and they're being told,
And
well,
the good ones get paid good.
they
because
have
they're
very
useful.
valuable jobs. They're very
Right.
really important to their company. So here's a stat for you: in a typical year, 71% of your revenue comes from existing customers.
Wow, yeah.
So therefore, why don't we do more to help these people do their job
even
well?
in a high growth company.
Correct. So why don't we help them do their job well? So Amplify is tools, resources, courses, and community for account managers so that they can get really, really good at their job.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Subscription type service, like you become an Amplify member,
It's
companies
an
buy
annual
it
membership
for their people based on how many employees they have and whatever.
It's an annual membership. People are signing up on their own.
Oh,
So they're because they want to grow, because they
Nice.
want to
Nice.
connect and network and improve their skills. If we have corporate members, we do have some corporate members, but corporate members, the engagement tends to be lower because my boss told me to do this,
Right.
fine, I'll go do this, versus I'm like super psyched to go do it.
Yeah.
Different story.
really cool.
Yeah.
How's that working? Are you
It's going great.
are you costing it by your focus on the podcast and the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit, or
It's
is it
super fun.
you
It's
just let it
super
happen?
fun. It works great. There's no reason that this business won't work. I don't yet have a sense of what the scale of that business is going to be.
Yeah,
But like the economics are good.
you're delivering value already.
We're delivering value. The funnel is, I'm still trying to figure out lots of stuff about the business.
Sure.
But generally speaking, it looks like it's going to work. And then I just don't know, how it evolves and changes over time. But so far, I'm super excited about it.
Cool. We already kind of covered the lots of stuff with TechStars, I think.
Yeah.
And so now our norm is to jump in the time machine and go find little Alex
Sure.
at like 5 years old or 7 years old or something like that. Where would we find you?
So, well, like let me just think about how I want to start. The answer is I grew up in Europe.
Okay.
And most people don't know that about me, or
As an American?
yeah, it's not quite like it's not immediately obvious that would have happened.
No.
But I'll tell you how it did come about, and then what it's done for my life philosophy.
Please.
So, I was born in the States. My parents are both from Massachusetts. They met at the University of Massachusetts in the late 1960s. They met on a blind date, and then my dad finished 1 year before my mom, and he took a job at Union Carbide. Union
Okay.
Carbide Chemical Company, which is now part of Dow Chemical.
Yep.
And he moved to a bunch of places, doing different roles, rose fairly quickly, like through their bureaucracy. And when he was I guess he was 35, and we were living in Connecticut, somewhere outside of like suburbs of New York City type of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And he had the opportunity to nominate someone on his team to go be some version of like deputy CIO for Europe. Think of it that way.
Okay.
I don't think that was what it was called, but that's essentially what it was. And he basically said, well, hang on, this is a slightly more junior position than I'm in now, but I would really like to go work
Right. I nominate me.
in Switzerland. So he put his hand up, and when I was 5, we moved to Geneva. And so I grew up in Geneva, Switzerland until I was 16.
Oh wow!
So
what a hub too, right?
So my entire schooling from first day of first grade up until halfway through 10th grade,
Yeah.
I was at the same school, the International School of Geneva, and I lived there. It's a bilingual school.
Yeah, I was going to say they taught you English and stuff properly.
It used to be the UN International School, then it changed its name. So it's there were two sides. There's a bilingual English side and a French side. I had to learn a third language. I took German for several years, and what that did for me was it kind of showed me how small the world is.
Yeah.
Now, the school that
How
I went
similar
to,
our journeys are.
the school that I went to had probably, I think the number was like 60 different nationalities represented within the school.
Yeah.
And so you go down to the cafeteria, and there's someone from Saudi Arabia, and there's someone from South Africa, and there's someone from Canada, and there's someone from England or whatever, and we all learn to get along. We all growing up together, right? So you're just kind of figuring out what does it mean to be human, right? Together when you.
How many students in this whole school?
It was not a big school. I don't know the full number. I would guess there might have been like 100 to 150 in my year.
Okay.
Right, divided into different little classes.
Yeah,
and stuff,
sure.
So
Yeah.
but that's just a guess.
Yeah.
Probably like a medium,
But a pretty big community.
medium-sized school. Yeah, not a gigantic thing, but the whole everything from first grade all the way to the end.
But the diversity quotient is off the charts.
Super high.
Yeah.
And so, because a lot of people are like, "Oh, wow, you grew up in Europe. What was it like?" And I'm like, for me, it was just childhood, right? I mean, I did basketball and baseball and Boy Scouts, and there's some classes I liked, some classes I didn't like, and
right.
sort of normal stuff. It just happened to be in what a lot of people think of as an exotic and interesting setting.
Fair.
But for me, it was really suddenly understanding, or not suddenly. It was really embodying and seeing every day that the world is small. There's people all around. Everyone basically has the same needs and challenges and interests, and that there's nothing to fear from going somewhere new or exploring something or working, having colleagues or friends who look different than you or sound different than you or speak a different language at home than you do and stuff like that. And so it made me very comfortable in a global environment.
Yeah.
And so later in my life, like I went to university at Georgetown in Washington, D.C. Again, super international. I was in the School of Foreign Service. After that, I lived in Boston, London, Baltimore, back in London, went to business school in France and Singapore. Mm-hmm. Then I moved to Hong Kong. Then I moved to Beijing. And then I moved to Boulder.
So out of all those, Baltimore seems like the one doesn't really fit.
Totally doesn't fit. And they twisted my arm to get there. Okay. I was working for the same company, and I was in London, and they were like, basically they were like,
we need somebody to go to Baltimore.
we need you at this office in Baltimore, or we're going to fire you.
If you have a future in this company.
Yeah. And I was like, fine. and I did it for about a year and a half. And there were pockets to like. There were things to like.
Sure, I'm sure.
But generally speaking, it was kind of an outlier in my life. And I didn't stay there for super long.
Yeah, fair enough. And you landed in Boulder, and you're like, okay, I'm done moving around with this.
Yeah, I mean, in between in the late '90s, my parents moved to Boulder from Massachusetts, so they moved out here, and so my wife and I were living in China. I lived in Asia for like 5 years, and
where did you find her at?
So in January 2006.
Okay.
I'd been living in Hong Kong for about 3 months.
All right.
I moved to Hong Kong for this job. And just because I was like, I want to live in Asia. It looks cool. Like, bang, let's figure it out. I made it happen. I found a company. Awesome. So I moved to Hong Kong. And as you do when you move to a new town, people are like, oh, I know such and such. And, so on. So one of my cousins Danielle had said, oh, a friend of mine from high school works for the U.S. consulate in Hong Kong. You should meet him when you get there. I'm like,
Okay.
yeah, sure. Great. Wonderful. And like, there's a lot of these when you're in late 20s. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who know people, and you're supposed to meet this person, that person, and whatever. So I met this guy at a Mexican bar in Hong Kong,
Okay.
and I had a beer and a shot of tequila, right? When we met and drank, okay, great, and we hung out a few times. He introduced me to a friend of his, and that friend of his had a wife. He also worked at the consulate. He had a wife who was from Spain. Okay, great.
And then you met her sister.
So this was in
Sorry.
So I moved there in 2005. So in early 2006, January 2006, I'm at the gym. I'm in the locker room, and I see there's a missed call from my friend Tyler and a voicemail. And I listen to voicemail. He's like, "Hey, want to see if you want to come over for dinner tonight?" And immediately I'm like, "Oh, I just got back from a business trip. I'm tired. I don't feel like going out. Whatever. Like, like no, I don't feel like it." And then, but then he leaves the little kicker at the end. He's like, "Yeah, I want to see if you want to come over for dinner tonight. We invited a couple of my wife's friends. These Mexican girls are coming over too."
Okay.
So I'm like, "Huh, that sounds a lot more interesting. I'm willing." And so I was like, "All right." I rallied and went out there. And on my way into their apartment, they lived on Kennedy Road in Hong Kong, and I lived on McDonald Road, which is just above it. So I walked down there, and as I'm getting to his house, into the lobby of the apartment building, there's two ladies standing there looking at the little like door thing you're supposed to punch in the code.
Yeah.
And I just walk up to them and I said, "I bet you're looking for 14B," or whatever his apartment number was. And they're like, "Oh yeah, how did you know?" And we walk in together, and one of them was my wife. So I spent the next.
Did it take you a while to figure out which one?
It did. I was very clear on the one that I was attracted to, and then I spent the next like several days like chasing her around Hong Kong, wherever she was going. I was, oh, I'm going to be in that area too. Let's grab a coffee. Let's hang out. And but amazingly, she lived in. So my wife's name is Laura. So she was living in Mexico. She lived in Guadalajara, and I lived in Hong Kong, and so we were like, what? How is this all going to work? And over the course of the 1 year that we were together before we got married, we managed to see each other pretty much once a month somewhere. So we met in San Francisco, Boston, Guadalajara, Bali, India, Hong Kong, Paris, whatever. It all
more
because like we were both like early 30s. I think we were both 30 at the time. And so it's just like, traveling for work. And so she'd go somewhere and I'd make up some excuse to go to. Or, it's also the age when friends are getting married. So there's all sorts of social stuff.
Pressures are there.
All sorts of stuff. So we just meet here. We'd meet there. It was awesome. And then we got married 13 months after we met.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yeah. That we just had our 18th anniversary.
You say Laura?
Laura, yeah. So I mean, like
Laura, effectively for.
Correct. Laura with the Mexican pronunciation.
Right. Yeah. I can't roll my R's
Laura.
properly yet.
Yeah,
I can sometimes, but and so you picked her up along the way, and
yeah. So we moved to
now
Boulder.
You're a team moving to Boulder.
We moved to Boulder because we decided we didn't want to live in China anymore.
Yeah.
And so one of the things about living in China is it's very cool, super interesting. Beijing was a really, really neat city to live in. I super enjoyed it. And I super enjoyed it right up into the minute where I was like, we need to leave now. So one day Laura was just like,
it's over.
Like we're leaving.
Interesting.
And so instead of fight it, I was just like, okay. And I think within 6 weeks we had sold everything, put other things in boxes, vacated the apartment, and boom, we were off. But we had a dog, another miniature schnauzer, Jackie, who we adopted in Hong Kong. And it was like, what do we do with Jackie? I was like, well,
send him to your
maybe
parents.
my dad. So my dad came over and we were like, hey, Dad, would you mind taking the dog back with you? And so when we decided to move to the States, was literally what we thought of it as. Like, okay, let's move to the States.
Right.
Where do we go?
We'll go pick up the dog first.
Well, we'll go pick up the dog first. And here we are 13 years later.
I jump ahead sometimes, but I can tell that's where you were going.
Yeah.
Well, schnauzers should guide the way. They're smart dogs.
Well, so Jackie, so we adopted Jackie from the Hong Kong Dog Rescue when she was 10.
Oh, wow.
So she was this incredibly sweet dog. She had this stare, she would just like get her way by like burrowing
My
into
dog
your
has
heart.
that, yeah.
And absolutely lovely dog. She lived until almost 18 years old.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
super dog.
I hope we have the same. Tucker just turned 12 this month, actually. So let's see. So you find Boulder, and then
Yeah.
like
Started a company.
shortly after you started the company.
Yeah.
Like, what was the impetus there? Were you capitalized? Did you not have a job? You were just moving back to the States.
Yeah,
freelance?
I'd been an entrepreneur already, but I just moved back to the States and was like, what do I do? And Laura was like, oh, well, you've been having this one idea. So I had an idea. It was in the HR software space. Called up a bunch of people I know. Some of them said, yeah, sure. I don't have anything else going on.
Okay.
My business partner moved here from South Africa to start the business. Like,
Okay.
super incredible.
Somebody that you knew before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Guy I knew from before. Incredible coder, super talented.
Yep.
And we were able to build, and we had a couple of other people who joined us. So we had a great gang and able to get a business off the ground. And that's what we went through TechStars with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the
Capta.
Capta. Like, what would you say were your special sauces in terms of being an entrepreneur? Sounds like you were the idea person and kind of needed to build teams, both of skills people as well as investors, to make these ideas happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you like? How did you get good at that? Like, you hadn't done it before, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Or a little bit, kind of.
I'd done some of this sort of stuff before. And so let me see, like, what's the interesting way to answer that? I'm not sure that I did it particularly well.
Okay, fair.
I would say that
The idea was good enough to weather all of the.
The idea was good enough, and then the spirit was there to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look back at that part of my entrepreneurial journey, I think we missed some opportunities. I think I wasn't as courageous about really examining all the different assumptions behind the business.
Mm-hmm.
I did not understand what it meant to capitalize a business for the future. What I mean by that is I was happy taking small checks and not realizing, to get a software company off the ground, it actually takes several millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So what we did was we raised like $750K, and it was like, oh, cool, awesome, but it doesn't last that long.
It's halfway there,
right? And then it was like,
Ish.
oh shit, we need to raise more. So then we went back and raised more, and then everyone was like, yeah, but you didn't do all the things you said you were going to do the first time, and so like that was incredibly painful.
Yeah.
And I do remember,
And the market doesn't get any bigger in the meantime.
Well,
usually,
and things don't get any easier.
Right.
And I remember two really good pieces of advice that I got. Didn't do anything with them, but they were true. The first one was someone telling me, hey, actually, to make this work, you need millions of dollars. And I was like, no, look at how far we're going to get with 750 or 500, whatever.
Right.
And he was like, you actually are going to need resources. So I should have listened to that one. And then the second one was, when you're at the very, very beginning, you can raise on the idea, the energy, and the vision.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you start getting revenue and customers, you only raise and get measured on the metrics.
Yep.
And so it's great. At the beginning, you have no idea. And so it's okay to
all
say,
blue sky.
hey, we got this gigantic market, and we're going to do this and that, and it's going to grow, but gangbusters and so on. And some people will buy into it and be willing to invest, and some people won't. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But then as soon as you get customers, it's like, well, what's your customer growth rate? What's your retention rate?
Yep.
Are they buying new stuff? How many users do they have? What's your NPS score? You get all these like metrics, and then they say, well, since this is a business, we're going to value this based on
what's your cash
your
flow?
growth rate and your cash flow and so on and so forth. So everything gets a lot harder. And entrepreneurs don't understand that part about fundraising. So raising at the seed round, to some extent, like, you're doing that on the dream and the future and the promise. People who are then raising Series A, B, C, etc., that's all the mechanics of the business.
So go bigger on the seed if you have a chance. Is that a fair statement?
I like if I did this again, it would be to raise enough capital at the beginning that we felt we could give it a good shot, right? Give it a real
Without
shot,
coming back to the well.
or don't go to the well to start with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
basically, just like right now, Amplify, not raise money, it's extremely low cost business,
Yep.
good dynamics. I don't need to raise money. Fine.
Yep.
But if I was doing something that needed resources, you got to go find the resources.
Yep.
And so, one of the issues that a lot of entrepreneurs that I know are suffering with right now is they raise money, $500K, $1 million, something that sounded interesting and meaningful at the
Sure.
time, and now they're like, but I've got a 10-person team,
Yeah.
and we have customers, we have revenue, but we don't have
My
enough
burn rate
revenue to
is
cover
this.
everything,
Yep.
and so they're and the thing is, an investor who gave you money for back in the day, let's say you raise $1 million on a $6 million pre
Sure.
or something like that, they're like fairly excited about you, and they're like, all right, but I understand. They're a whole lot less willing if all of a sudden you're down to 5 people and you might have $500,000 in
Totally.
revenue. They're like,
Right.
right? Because these guys are all about swings, right? Like they want to see you swinging and hitting it.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that I, when I think back on my journey here is like I should have thought harder about just shutting it down.
Really?
Yes. So the
Interesting.
business continued, and the business is still going now.
Okay.
And we pivoted the business. We found a thing that worked, et cetera. So I'm not saying this as a knock on the business, but I'm saying for me as a CEO, I should have thought more about, do we stick with this or not?
Wow.
Because what I realized was the opportunity cost is real. The sunk cost fallacy is
very real.
Attribution bias is real. Right? Attribution bias is, this is my idea, so it must be a good idea. Right?
Yep.
And sunk cost is, I've already been doing this for 5 years. What's one more year?
Yeah, I'll waste it if I. Yeah.
Versus, am I excited about the future, which is the opportunity cost? So I actually quit the company I founded last summer.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the thing: is I just got to the point where I was burned out. I wasn't being helpful or effective to the business.
Yeah.
So I was
You
not
weren't
in
excited
service.
about it anymore.
I was not of service to the business.
Yep.
And then I was feeling guilty because my head wasn't in it.
Yeah.
So it made me less effective because I felt guilty.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like I would say I'm being a bad CEO is what I was telling
Right.
myself, right? Because a good CEO would be, focused and hard charging and doing
Right.
all these things. And
Meanwhile, you're passionate about the Conscious Entrepreneurs Summit
And I'm
your
just like-
podcast and this
and
and
I'm just
that.
doing things to like distract me from this, right? Instead of what was really going on, I'd run my course with the business. The business deserves a new home, a new thing, etc. And it took me a long time to fully separate myself out.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I was like trapped by this idea that we just need one more X.
Yeah.
X, literally.
Yeah.
One more customer, one more year, one more feature, one more
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? And I would have been better off myself, like several years earlier, saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, you know what? I got it to a certain level. I'm ready to go
I'm
on
not
and do
as
something
passionate
else.
about
I'm
this
not as
as I
passionate,
was."
and I stuck with it too long."
Yeah. Well, thanks for confessing that. That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I was just going to mention while I'm thinking about it that in banking, like people would come to try to borrow, 100 or 150 grand sometimes
Right.
for an SBA loan, and I was really good at startup financing. I could see that combination of talent and perseverance.
Yeah.
And gosh, I bet about 20 or 30% of the time, and it wasn't because I wanted to make a bigger loan, but borrow a little more than you think you need. Like make that case, because you can't really come back to the well with banks either.
Correct.
Like you can get a startup loan, but if you come back for more because it didn't work like you thought it was going to work, nope, you fooled me once.
It's not a good look. It's
Yeah.
not a good look.
And it's probably maybe a tiny more forgiving when you're talking about equity, but not that much.
Well-
it's the same kind of game.
So the surprising thing about the equity investor, to your point, the surprising thing about the equity investor is that they are willing to let the company go poof.
Right.
Right? They're just like, it didn't work out.
Right.
Sorry. And you're like, but wait a minute, you put in $1 million, and they're like,
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
I put $1 million into a bunch of other things too, and I'm going to go put another few million
and you're
into
like,
one of them.
but this is my baby. Like, and they're just like, I don't
Yeah,
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, banks are always trying to get their money back. you
Right.
know?
And the investors are just like, "Meh."
yeah, You're
well, part
done.
because their model is they want a 25x return on one deal.
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Versus the rest of them are just
They don't
occupying
care how
time and
many
space
things
in their
they
brain.
kill. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Understood. Well, we're going to take a break,
Okay.
and we'll come right back.
Hi, this is Clint Jasperson, Managing Partner at Purpose Driven Wealth. We believe financial clarity leads to a life of contentment and purpose. Our mission is to guide clients through the complexities of wealth management, retirement planning, and legacy using a values-driven, stewardship-based approach focused on provision, contentment, and enjoyment. With more than a century of expertise through Thrivent, we offer tailored strategies to help individuals and families achieve their goals and embrace generosity. Whether you're navigating a life or business transition or planning for the future, we're here to partner with you every step of the way. To learn more about Purpose-Driven Wealth, call 970-330-7411.
And we are back. So now is when we traditionally come into our faith, family, and politics segments. Do you have a preference on where we start in that cluster?
Go ahead.
I feel like we should talk about family more because we kind of met your wife along the journey here. Do you guys have children?
We don't have children.
Okay. Even though that social pressure in your early 30 or 30-ish was there to like start making some smart babies and stuff.
It was all there. We couldn't. We tried IVF. We tried.
So you did full boat.
Oh, we did. We did everything, but it didn't happen.
My wife and I don't have any children, and but we've hosted a bunch of exchange students.
Nice.
And so if you're looking for something to have periods of adulting in your life, I highly recommend we're finishing up our first 1-year exchange right now. For the whole school year.
Wow.
I'd recommend the semester exchange.
Start smaller.
At least start smaller before you go big. And even now, I'm like, Lenny's awesome. Lenny from Finland is staying with us, but I'm kind of tired of putting my robe on when I want to go from the shower to my bedroom.
Sure.
And there's just things like that.
Well, I mean, we have a very Laura and I have a very quiet life compared to all of our friends with kids.
Right.
And so occasionally
they're slaves to their children.
Well, we have a lot of friends who have kids, and when we hang out with them, I mean, there's times when we're just like, holy shit! Like, how do people with children get anything done ever?
Right.
Yeah. Our niece, like my niece, our goddaughter was over with Laura's brother and his wife in January, and it's just like total chaos all the time. Yeah. And like the success of the day is like having lunch.
Well, and I think there's one thing that's interesting about that is I think that people with children actually get like an extra switch flipped where they can actually work a little harder. And they have a little bit more purposeful intention to their days. And, probably to some extent they don't, this is going to sound weird, but they don't need the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit as much because they know that they're working to raise their kids and provide for their family.
They have the purpose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. As long as you got that, you can kind of pedal hard, even without really knowing where you're trying to go.
Right.
So, talk to me about your wife a little bit more.
Sure.
Was she born and raised in Europe also, or what was her circumstance as a person?
Sure. So Laura's from Guadalajara. Well, she was born in Mexico City.
Okay.
And she grew up in Guadalajara.
All right.
So she's full on Mexico. Both of her parents have passed away, but she has a big family in Mexico. Great people that live all over the country, actually. Yeah. And so we go down there and see them a lot.
Yeah.
And it's funny.
You're like the tall white guy that comes to some of the
sometimes
in comparison to
some of her friends call me hombre blanco, so yes, I'm a lot fairer skinned and I burn a lot easier than a lot of her friends, but she has this very adventurous part of her, and so when we got married, when we got engaged and all this stuff, there wasn't this sense of like, oh, you're leaving, right? Like, oh, stay in Mexico. It was much more the sense of like, we always knew you were gonna, go travel and go find someone over internationally and stuff like that. So that wasn't such a great big shock for her family that she was marrying a foreigner, marrying a gringo, and so that's allowed us to have a life living in lots of places, because after we got married, we lived in Hong Kong, and then we lived in Beijing, and now we live in Boulder. So it's been great for us to have that shared desire, if you will.
Sure, sure. And are your parents were in Boulder before you were? Are they still
Yeah.
with you guys too?
Yeah, my parents are still alive. My mom moved into a memory care center in Boulder in August, so she has Alzheimer's, and so she needs full-time care and attention. My dad has been looking after her as the caretaker for 2 or 3
which
years,
is quite a burden too.
which is huge amount of work, really ton of work. It's been wearing him down. Of course, it was pretty tough decision to, they've been married for 55 years.
You try to do everything you can to keep that from happening.
Correct. You do, but in August it was like, hey, we really need to do this. We did it. The good thing is the center that she's in is super close to my house, actually.
Nice.
So we're able to see her a lot. But she's on a journey.
She's fading. Yeah.
She's on a journey, and unfortunately, this is it's a one-way road.
My dad's mom had dementia, Alzheimer's, and it took, gosh, for her it was like 7 years probably that she was institutionalized with just struggles to live on her own kind of capability, and it's I don't know, it's an interesting thing. Like it's a I don't know how to think about this right. Like some comedian said recently, a lot of Down syndrome's babies are aborted and stuff like that, and the hospital will be like, hey, you should do this if they figure it out. But Down's people are like the happiest people he's ever known. And I've kind of applied that in some respects almost to the Alzheimer's dementia kind of quadrant, that except for those times of extreme frustration, especially early on, like to some extent they're kind of chilling.
Some of them. That's not what's happening in my. No, that's not. The way that this seems to be affecting her is, it's primarily hitting like her visual perception and her visual analysis.
Oh wow!
And therefore how she experiences the world.
Just confusion all the time.
All the time. Inability to recognize ordinary objects in front of her. Not sure what how to put the clothing, all that sort of stuff. Very difficult.
Interesting.
She could be looking at two very different objects and have no idea what they are. Type of thing.
Wow.
So it's really and we don't. There's a lot that people don't know about this, and so we don't know what's exactly going on. We don't know how to truly help, and so it's like really tough. To see this. Yeah.
Well, I'll maybe be blessed with strength and perseverance as this goes. And,
Thank you.
And be blessed by whatever service you can provide. You guys have schnauzers.
Yeah.
Or you had one, now you have another one.
Yeah.
So.
Well, actually, I'll tell you a story.
Okay.
So we had another one. When Jackie died, it was devastating. Like putting my dog down was just like the worst. And then we finally came around to, okay, we want to get another dog. And right around that time, I read this great book called Tribe. I think the author is Sebastian Junger.
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
I've seen the title.
Okay.
I haven't read it.
So it's a great book, and it's about how we all need connection in our lives and how we're all better together and so on. So I'm reading this book, and I'm like, oh, we don't need one puppy. We need two puppies.
Okay.
So that they can keep each other company and they can
be each other's tribe.
They're going to be each other's friends, and they'll all be together. And so my wife's like, "Are you sure about this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I just read it. I read a book, but yeah, let's do it." And so we got our dog in Mexico.
Okay.
Because they're in the town where Laura's aunts live, and it's very easy and whatever.
So schnauzers are expensive in the US.
Schnauzers are like $200 in Mexico. So
right.
So we FaceTime with the guy or video. We know the dogs that we're getting, and we had the one, and we told him in advance before she was born, don't dock the tail. So Dash has a long tail. So we're like, don't dock the tail. We don't want we want our dog to be intact. We poor thing. Like if her tail's cut off. So we're like, don't dock the tail. And then we're like, oh shit, we want a second dog. Go find a second dog. And he's like, well, we've got one, but the tail's already docked. And we're like, okay, we'll keep those two dogs. We'll do that. And so one night I was drifting off to sleep. I was literally like just about to get to sleep. And I jump up and I look at my wife and I go, Dot and Dash.
like Morse code style.
Like that's the name of the dogs. Dot for the one that doesn't have a tail, and Dash for the one that does. That's what we're gonna call them. And then I went back to sleep. But I had the names. The names just appeared, right? And I was like, perfect. So we go down to Mexico one time when we're visiting her family, and it's Christmas time. We're picking up the dogs, and we go to the breeder thing, and we get the dogs. We bring them back to the States, and literally all hell breaks loose once we have two dogs in the house. Like they are just chasing each other and barking and fighting, and they won't pay any attention to the humans.
Yeah, you're not the boss.
And they're like just trying to establish dominance over the other, and they won't, they're not eating, and we have to split them up to take them to the Humane Society for the training sessions and all this sort of stuff. But it's like they're squabbling on it, and so Laura and I are just like, what did we do? Like, this is so much work. This is exponentially different. This is not 2 times having a puppy. This is like 25 times having a puppy. What did we do? Why is this so much work? Why is this so difficult? And as soon as we do that, I start Googling, and literally every single page is like, don't get 2 puppies at the same time. Never get 2 puppies. If there's one piece of life advice, it's never get 2 puppies. And I was like, uh-oh. So I guess I made a mistake here because they say that dogs won't pay attention to you.
Yeah.
They want not to do it. And
they're competing for like dominance instead of just acknowledging you as the boss man.
So therefore,
so could I interject actually? Because the first thought that came into my mind when you said that is an old truism, I guess, from my father. And it was, gosh, I was probably a teenager in high school. He's like, or maybe I was already in college even. He's like, son, a dog is a good thing to have. It's a man should have a dog. It's a good thing, but no dogs is way better than 2 dogs. And that was all he ever said about it.
Your dad was right about that. So what I learned a little bit too late was that it's okay to have 2 dogs. If you want your dog to have a friend, that's okay. But wait until one dog is like a year or 2 old and then get a puppy, right? Or whatever. But when they're 2 puppies, it's a disaster. So it's a nightmare. Now, on the topic of family, Laura and I are very blessed. We have a very peaceful life. We have a great marriage. We love and respect each other. We're committed to one another. We've had a great time. The closest we have ever gotten to divorce
you had 2 dogs
was when I sold the second dog.
Oh, no shit.
Yes.
Oh, you were like, I'm taking care of business here.
I put the dog on Craigslist. And
made a nice tidy margin because it's a schnauzer after all.
So the funny thing is, we had these 2 dogs. We had the one dog, Dot, who was like jet black, beautiful, very good behavior, smart dog, connected to humans, total dog, like textbook beautiful dog.
Yeah.
And then we have the other one, which is the one we kept, which is like goofy, not as pretty. She's kind of like
Model
I don't know,
coat.
Yeah, she's just like, anyway, she's cute in her own way, but like she's different. She's definitely not that smart either. But that's the one we decided to keep, and I sold the other one.
Okay.
And basically the family just came over, and Laura was like, "Oh, we need to think about it, this, that, and the other." And I was like, "Here's the dog." They gave him money, and whoo boy. So I felt like I was just solving a problem, right? And I was actually creating a gigantic problem, and I was breaking trust with my wife, and it caused...
You guys talked with your counselor about that.
It caused tremendous upset.
Yes. Yes. That was her baby by that time.
For a week or 2. So that was a big problem, and I was reminded of it many times, rightfully so. And anyway, so the moral of the story is...
Laura, for allowing him that indiscretion.
Yeah, we survived. We survived. It wasn't easy. By the way, like not having the one dog was also not very pleasant. But like giving away the dog was great. But way better just have one than 2.
Yeah. Well, you can go steal that dog back.
Yeah.
sometime.
Moral of the story: it moved to Colorado Springs.
Yeah, you can go down there for a weekend sometime and kind of scope out the spotting scope, and see if Dash is ready to be adopted. Faith or politics would you like to venture into?
I mean, I could talk about either. My politics, I told you I went to college at Georgetown.
Yeah. Washington, D.C. is
School of Foreign Service.
Cultural thing going on right now, I imagine.
Oh, I'm sure.
Like a lot of mayhem going on in people's thoughts right now.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, so Georgetown is a school that has produced a lot of people in government, produced a lot of politicians, and produced a president, Bill Clinton.
Sure.
So I am a big fan of Bill Clinton when I just went to school. When I was basically I started in '94, so he'd been president for 2 years.
Yeah.
So it was cool because he would like come back to the alma mater and like give
Sure.
speeches, like really cool. So my politics are liberal. Fan of Bill Clinton, fan of
Well,
Barack Obama.
Bill Clinton would be conservative in today's world in a lot of respects, though.
Yeah, I mean,
Although the world has changed, not necessarily the rankings, right?
the U.S. is always skewed to the right. So even the people that we consider liberal in the U.S. typically would be centrists in Europe, for
Yeah,
example.
for sure.
Yeah, and but big fan of Bill Clinton. I worked on his reelection campaign in 1996,
Okay,
so I was
all
like
right.
a student volunteer on his reelection campaign in '96, and that was fun. And had a chance to shake his hand a couple of times at events and whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, what do you think about the current events in politics? I'm guessing that the general, like, Larimer County, like in the last election, went like 67% for Harris,
Yeah.
which was one of the few counties that actually increased from the
Yeah,
Biden.
we were like 88 or something like that. in
Yeah,
Boulder,
so
yeah.
I would imagine that there's a lot of gnashing of teeth and consternation culturally going on right
yeah.
now, and Boulder is probably more heavily funded from federal grants than Fort Collins, which is pretty heavily funded too. Have you gotten in those conversations, or like,
No, like not. I don't really have much insight into the funding mechanisms. I know that like people in Boulder were pretty fucking pissed off,
right? I'm sure.
and it hasn't gotten a lot better since November. And as it relates to Trump, he is doing what he said he was going to do.
Yeah.
And so the
Yeah, I see a lot of videos on X.com
Yeah.
that say that.
So the reminders are that elections have consequences, and to the victor belong the spoils. And he is our vehicle of reminding us of that right now. Like he said what he was going to do. He's doing it, and we shouldn't all be acting surprised about what's going on.
Yeah.
I don't agree with essentially any of what's happening, and I wish it was the outcome had been different. I wish Kamala Harris were our president, or I wish there was some Democrat or whatever. But the world that we live in is such that we have this scorched earth, winner takes all politics, and I don't think it's setting us up for future success at all. So that makes me very uncertain. And we have a lot of friends who are like, "Why are we still here? Why bother? Why stay in the States?"
Interesting. Like a lot of what's getting the headlines is just cutting of unnecessary spending stuff.
Yeah.
Do you agree with some of that? Just not the fashion by which it's done, or like when I, as a banker, 15 years a banker, when I look at our like debt profile as a company, the United States of America, I look at that, 30 whatever trillion kind of thing, and look, if we don't turn this around, it's not going to work. And so, and I voted for Trump for my first time. Actually, I voted for Gary Johnson, the Libertarian, and Kanye West because I thought it was a protest vote last time, but I didn't like the way the Democrats handled the primary,
Sure.
and I didn't like Kamala as a candidate. I
Okay.
thought she was terrible.
Okay.
And unelected, and unprimaried. And so for the very first time, I voted for Trump, and I'm kind of like in this mix of nervous, but also as a more libertarian leaning kind of guy from a fiscal perspective. I'm like, well, somebody had to stop going $2 trillion more a year into debt eventually.
So
And so there's part of me that's cautiously optimistic about some of the spending uncoverings, we'll say.
I don't know the full detail on all the numbers,
Yeah.
but I do know that Republican administrations tend to talk a great game.
And Trump was terrible last time.
Well,
like
but-
he
but
blew
by
the
the way-
debt up worse.
By the way, so was Bush. Mm-hmm. Right. So who did all the TARP?
Well, because
Bush.
of wars, mostly.
Well, who started the war?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and Trump's the first anti-war Republican in a long time.
Which I don't think there's anything wrong with being anti-war. But the thing that I do know is the messaging on the debt is one thing. The actions on the debt are something completely different.
Right.
And it's funny because it's like one of these big immovable blocks, Republicans are better at spending and taxation and so
Right.
on. But as far as I'm aware, at least, and I'm not a professional at this, as far as I'm aware, that's not true in the slightest. Like the only president or the last one to have anything close to a
Yeah,
balanced budget
Clinton
or
had
a
a surplus
surplus
for a minute.
was Bill Clinton.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Well, and he was the last person to talk about reducing the size of government in any capacity.
They had that very, very famous thing with Al Gore, and they're doing this whole government efficiency
Totally.
thing. So I don't think that this is a trade-off between should government be efficiently run and effective, or should it be bloated and wasteful and stupid?
Right.
Like, yes, of course. And at the same time, I understand the method that Elon Musk is going through. Like, I understand
Yeah.
I understand how he operates. Right, super engineers it, cuts all the way down to the bone, and then adds back what we need to, but see what we can survive without, etc. Okay, great. I think there's
So is it fair to say you're kind of cautiously optimistic as well in that regard?
no.
No.
Here's why.
Okay.
I don't think this is about government efficiency. I think this is about bludgeoning the things that they don't like.
Yeah.
And
There's
there's a difference.
Concern. Yeah,
There's
for sure.
like an objective thing that said, you know what, we need to take the government down by X billions of dollars. So let's do a review and see what's
Sure.
out there and see what we want to keep and what we don't want to keep. Okay, fine. If instead it's we're going to go after these things that have cultural significance
Yep.
or that have some sort of
All the DEI stuff
meaning
goes
to
away,
us, or they
any
right,
foreign
kind of some sort of
funding
built-in
kind of stuff.
issues. We're going to go for them, and then we're going to basically throw a bomb into their office.
Now, if you see, which I would not be shocked to see this administration like announce a big investment into the inner cities of America, in part as a big middle finger to the leaders of those inner cities, right? The
Yeah.
Chicagos, the Bostons, the
Okay.
Detroits, the New Yorks, whatever. And I think that would be an amazing thing because we've let our inner cities be rotten for way too long in terms of socioeconomic opportunity. Like, is that something that you think the more liberal caucus would support? Or would they not like it because Donald Trump said to do it and so therefore we hate it? Like, that's one of my concerns about not
Yeah.
just that policy particular, but that's one that I can imagine that you would resonate with.
Sure.
And that I think Trump would resonate with because he loves the black vote. He loves the Latino vote. He's a populist. That's how they do it.
He claims to be a populist, and I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? So it depends on what's going to happen, and it depends on what these guys are doing.
What the outcomes are.
Yeah, like it all depends. If let me put it this way: if I felt like I didn't agree with this guy, I didn't vote for him, but he's clearly working in the interest of solving big, complicated problems for the benefit of the entire country, and if not the entire world.
Yeah.
And we're all going to put our heads together and see what the outcomes are. And maybe he has a different approach or wants to run different experiments than I
Yeah.
might
Yeah,
want. Then I'd be like, okay, I get that.
All right.
But that's not how I feel.
Okay.
How I feel is this is a lunatic with a vendetta who has
Interesting.
brought his own set of people in
Yeah.
and are bullying the entire country and basically like a mind fuck on the entire country,
Interesting.
which makes me less receptive
Yeah, for
to
sure.
what everybody else
For
might
sure.
be out there.
Well, I like to say, ask me to do something nicely, and I'm probably on board. But tell me, and I'm raising both of these.
Sure.
And so that perception, like to me, that first scenario you described of doing interesting things to try to modernize and efficiency-ize the government, that's been my heart tone so far. Although very much a skeptic. And I can see how you could think what you think,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Tell me about your faith background and your wife, for that matter, because I think that's interesting when you're talking about international communities and
Yeah.
growing up in Switzerland,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
historically, like, is Switzerland still a Christian nation?
Well, Geneva is, I don't know if it's the birthplace, but certainly the home of John Calvin.
Okay, so
a lot-
Calvinism.
Yeah. So very serious people, the Swiss.
Yeah.
But not that has not
Is
necessarily.
Calvinism kind of the predestination kind of thing?
It's the
Like, Oh, I fell down the stairs, but that was bound to happen.
I think so. Maybe.
Anyway,
maybe.
I digress.
But they're very like serious and rigid,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So there's a reason the Swiss have the reputation that they do.
Right.
Yeah, it's because it's true. But I'll share about Laura first. So Laura is culturally and historically Catholic. Mexico is a very Catholic country.
Yep.
And so she went to Catholic schools and, went to church all the time and all this sort of stuff. It's not been a guiding force in her life as an adult, but it's something that's pervasive.
She's knowledgeable.
It's pervasive in Mexican culture. It's just like what you do. It's just like how things are.
Totally.
And so, we got married in a church.
Scandal.
It was a negotiation. When she told me we were getting married in church, I was like, what? And then,
But less disruptive than you selling off.
well, yeah, it was less of a big deal because we were still excited about the potential, about the future. I'll tell that story in a second. But so my mom's Irish Catholic,
Okay.
right? Which comes with all the Irish Catholic guilt
Yeah.
and all that sort
And
of stuff.
that's why your beard is nice and white.
That's my
and
beard.
your
That's why I look
head is
up-
nice and bald.
That's how I
kinda.
look like I do because of Irish. And so she's from Springfield, Massachusetts, Irish Catholic family. Grew up. So my mom also went to Catholic schools until she got to university, and so my dad probably got dragged to church as a kid, but like wasn't such a big deal for him.
Yeah.
It wasn't really part of his life. But when I was a kid, I did get dragged to church, and it was drag is the word, right? It was like, oh,
Like
really?
already.
And my mom will now say that she would have to start warning us like on Tuesday, right? That we're going to church on Sunday, and just hear all the bitching and moaning until it was time for Sunday. And so we wouldn't go often, but we would go like maybe every other week or once a month.
kind
Yeah,
of
like
thing.
sort of thing. It wasn't just Christmas and Easter, but it was like occasional. And we went to the American church in Geneva, not the Catholic church in Geneva. And so we went there, and
Which was basically what, like a kind of a bland Protestant kind of church? kind of thing?
Episcopalian.
Okay, yeah,
So
sure.
as close to Catholic as you can
Yeah,
get,
yeah.
and everything was in English, and
They just didn't think the Pope was that cool.
there was a whole community there, and like
Yeah.
friends went there, and it's where we had like our Boy Scout ceremonies were in this church. So like it was like a part of the community, if you will.
Yeah.
And I got, but I had gotten baptized Catholic when I was born.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So this is gonna feature in our
So you
story.
gotta get redunked.
It's going to feature in our story in a second.
Okay.
And then I was dragged kicking and screaming through a confirmation process in the Episcopalian church when I was 13 or 14. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is, but whatever.
But you memorized the books of the Bible, so
They were going to
they passed.
withhold my allowance or not give me a skateboard or whatever it was that,
Yeah.
I went and I did this. And then I went to so Georgetown is a Jesuit school.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I actually had a little flirtation with like Catholicism my freshman year.
Yeah, and the Jesuits are like the super they're the super liberal part of the Catholic.
But they're a
Church,
serious bunch.
kinda.
They're a serious
They're
bunch.
serious, but they're pretty liberal.
Serious bunch. And so I went to mass a couple times, probably like 6 or 7 times my first semester of freshman
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
And because I was like curious and wanted to explore and learn about it, but it didn't really stick, if you will. And so organized religion has never played much of a part in my life, but
It's never really stuck.
never really stuck. But let me come back to this getting married in a church thing. So after we get engaged, we had this conversation about getting married in a church, and I was like, I'd never even considered getting married. I was like, why bother? We'd just go get married on the beach in Mexico. It's going to be great.
Right.
And I was like, no, for my family, blah, 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 whatever. We're getting married in a church. Okay, fine. I accede. I will allow that. I will compromise. And
submit,
and
basically.
then she's like, okay, I need like some paperwork because the priests are asking about this, that, and the other. Here's the problem. Because I had been baptized,
I accept the Catholic this and
because
that.
I had been baptized Catholic,
Oh.
but not confirmed Catholic, I didn't quite count, but I counted enough. Like I could have been a total heathen, right? Like let's say that I was
Totally.
Jewish or I was not Catholic or whatever. The Catholics would have been fine. He can still get married in the church. He just has to, sign here or whatever.
check here,
But
yeah.
because I had some Catholic history and
But it
background,
seemed like to them that you had rejected the faith
I had
by going Episcopalian.
I had to go have meetings with this priest in Hong Kong, and like I got lectured like 3 or 4 times. I had to go find a buddy of mine to come and like be my sponsor for the Catholicism thingy-majiggy. And I was like, God. And I was, I had this job. I was traveling all over the world. I was super busy, and I wanted nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
And it was like part of what I had to go through just to get the stupid piece of paper so that this guy would marry us at this church in Mexico. So anyway, so it was all that just to get the piece of paper.
That's largely your faith journey is reluctant
Yes.
acceptance
Yes.
ish
Yes.
of the cultural relevance.
And now,
so have you investigated like do you think that a god spun this whole thing up, like the god, like the one god, or do you think this is like a happy accident? And what do you do with Jesus or Muhammad or like the Jewish Talmud or the Hindu book of Proverbs or whatever they have?
I think there have always been charismatic people in the world who find
Okay.
followers with
All right.
messages of hope and upliftment and improvement. And
So you're one of those with the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit, kind of ish.
I mean, to like a 0.000 fraction of it.
Okay.
But I think there've always been these kind of people.
Yeah.
And then I think people hear what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And I think stories and rituals emerge as a result of those. And I think for the most part, they're well intentioned. And I think that these things have been purveyors of death and destruction for pretty much as long as they've been around.
Yeah.
And so I don't spend a lot of time on organized religion. And when it comes to the bigger picture stuff, my personal experiences are that I spend a lot more time just connecting with myself and trying to understand who I am.
Okay.
And I spend less time on big cosmological questions.
Like, where do you think ethics come from if it's not from a creator type thing or these old texts or these old things? Like, that's one of the phrases, or we call it a meme almost.
Sure.
That if God isn't God, then the state is God, is something I've heard. The government is God, whoever tells me what to do, because I've seen a lot of evidence of people just wanting to be told what to do.
Sure.
In the world, and whether that's by some kind of an organized religion or some other stuff,
Yeah.
like people cling to that. So talk to
Totally.
me about like what is the right thing to do, what is the ethical thing to do, and how do you know that?
My personal view on this is that ethics is primarily a social construct. And that we've all agreed over time to behave in a certain way or
Right.
not behave in a certain way to
Thou shalt not murder was
to
basically
maximize
an
happiness and potential
Yeah.
in everyone. And we've realized that it's not a good idea to race to the bottom if we can lift each other up or agree to a certain amount of rules. I do think that there are a lot of people who want to be told what to do. There are people who are more comfortable in the passenger seat than the driver's seat.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them.
Totally.
And I think that like my journey in the world is, so my spiritual journey is figuring out who am I.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the vehicle that I've chosen to do that is a physical form, and it's running a business, and it's being married, and all that stuff. Like
Yeah.
these are all ways through which I test my spirituality and understand who I am.
Yeah.
I am one of the people who wants to understand. Like I'm an Enneagram 5, which is one of the people who wants to learn.
Yeah.
Right? So I want to connect the dots. I want to figure out what's really going on. But a lot of my focus is just internal.
Yeah.
Right? Like what's going on for me? What's going on inside of me?
Yeah.
Who am I? Who am I showing up as? What do I have to learn? And so that's the aspect for me of when I think of faith. I don't so much look outside to say, "Oh, give me an answer," right? Whoever you are.
Okay.
Like I just need a sign, right? That's not really my experience. My
Not your
experience
jam.
is
Yeah.
no, it's not my jam. My experience is what's happening inside me and what can I learn from that?
Yeah.
Because I'm the product of thousands of generations of humans, and there's a lot of wisdom inside me, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm experiencing today on a day-to-day basis where I can figure out why am I here, what am I doing here, simply in this physical experience.
So you're I would say in the space of kind of material postmodern ish kind
Right.
of thought process.
Humanism. I think it's
humanism.
called,
Yeah. So, like from your perspective, there isn't really like a more powerful force that created this thing, or even a necessarily a universal consciousness that, like, if you pray or if you do this or do that, you can kind of move the consciousness to your thing, or I don't know. Like, talk to me about that.
I
Like,
think
is there a more powerful, like a creator force out there in your understanding?
actually I have no idea how we got to be where we are.
Fair.
Right?
Yeah.
How we got to be on this rock.
Doesn't matter.
How we got to be
We're here.
on this rock spinning
Right.
around in the middle of nothing and have water on it, and we have people, and like I have no idea how we got there. What I believe is that we've got a certain amount of time to experience our lives here.
Yeah.
A thing that I really loved was this expression, make the dash dance. So here's what that means.
Talking about your dog.
In my case,
No.
it starts with 1976, the year I was born, dash, some year I'm going to die. I don't know what year that is, but there's a dash in between when I was born and when I'm going to die. Make the dash dance means, to me, have fun, have the full experience, order the entire all-you-can-eat buffet, do the things that bring me life.
The wiggle, the dash
Make
with the
the dash
wiggle
dance.
is like, who knows
Make the dash
where
dance.
that end time is.
Correct.
But live there.
Correct.
That's fair. So is it fair to say you resonate more with like Buddhism type notions of the expression of the world, or humanism and Buddhism?
I mean, look, I've done meditation programs
Sure,
in
I'm sure you've
India.
experienced a ton of stuff.
I've done
Right.
I've done whole things on Hinduism and Hindu gods and Shiva and
But
this
you
one
don't
and
think
that
any
one.
of them are really got it figured out.
I
And-
think these are nice representations to try to understand the world,
Yeah.
right? So Buddhism, I'm not a Buddhist,
Yeah.
but it's probably the one that I'm comfortable with because Buddhism basically just says experience yourself
Yeah.
and see what you learn and see how you can become a better person tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and it doesn't necessarily have a creator force in it. It's just like, hey, you're here,
Yeah.
make the best of it, dude.
Yeah. So I don't know what it is, but I typically don't have these like big philosophical questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're more.
I center
do-
on me. I center on me instead. Yeah.
thing. I definitely would say I'm not quite opposite, but it's interesting how we came to so many similar places, like
Yeah.
earlier in our conversation, but from a different psychosomatic context. So this is our grab bag.
Yeah. Let's do it.
It's ping pong balls with numbers on them.
Should I pick
So
one?
Pick three.
Pick three.
Pick three. Okay.
One.
Number one. Okay. Do you want to give me all three numbers and I'll decide what order?
29
Okay.
and 5.
129 and 5. So one is, what's your favorite childhood memory? 5 is, what's the most important lesson you've learned from failure? And 29 is, what's been the most surprising thing about running your business? And I would say in this context, it's probably either the summit or the podcast. So I'm going to start with that last one.
Okay.
What's been the most surprising thing about running your business? Whether it be CAPTA, whether it be your current recent enterprise or the summit, the podcast, like, what's surprising about that to you that you wouldn't have imagined before you became a proper entrepreneur that had to make his money from making money?
Himself. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that surprised me most, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but the
Yeah.
thing that surprised me most about running the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit is the emotional context and the emotional meaning that people put on the word conscious. So
That's why I assume you were going to smoke a joint with me.
yeah,
or
quite. So
hit
people make all
mushrooms
these
or
assumptions. It's like, oh, it's it's all hippies, or it's all totally out there, or oh, it's all for like people who these aren't real businesses,
whatever. Right. Totally.
These are
Yep,
these
yep.
are fake. This is a bunch of small potatoes businesses kind of thing, right? And that's not how I think of the word at all. I think of the word
Totally.
as intention and meaning and purpose and manifesting and awareness. Like all that goes into creativity.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
me, all that goes into conscious.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when I get that response from people, I'm always like, oh, right?
Yeah, that's fair. And I'm like the most open, conservative, born and raised in North Dakota kind of guy you're going to meet. And so for me, conscious doesn't mean that at all, but I recognize the truth of that statement,
Yeah.
if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, good job starting to break that barrier.
I'm trying.
What did we say? Number one, favorite childhood memory or the most... No, we already said that one. And number five, the most important lesson you've learned from failure. Let's go there next.
So I'm going to talk about failure in the context of what I was talking about earlier with my journey with CAPTA.
Yeah.
The business is still around.
Right.
So it's difficult. It's difficult to say it failed, but I can say that there were multiple places where I could have been stricter with myself.
Mm-hmm.
I could have held myself to certain standards, and I could have followed through more on the things that I knew I wanted to do.
Mm.
And so, to a certain extent, with that experience, I wasn't being courageous.
Mm.
I wasn't being as brave as I could have been. And what that meant, how the failure manifested, it was a failure of me to fully express my needs and wants and desires,
Yeah.
and to implement those instead of being on the
Kind of
on the
swept
train
along
and
with
swept along or in the passenger seat of the entire thing.
So you feel like maybe if you could have advocated a little bit better, you'd still be there pointing toward what you were focusing on, potentially?
The way I think of it is, I probably would have made a decision for myself to leave sooner.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, last question. Your favorite childhood memory?
Oh yeah.
And one of these questions, we're going to give a gift away to a lucky listener, by the way. But they have to listen to the whole darn podcast to get here.
Favorite, let's see.
Yeah, favorite childhood memory.
There's a really amazing fireworks show
Okay.
that takes place in Geneva during a festival called the Fête de Genève. It's like the town's celebration of itself. You know, the town.
The
day.
towns all across North Dakota where I grew up.
Yeah.
have
So
the
it's
same
like
thing.
right. So it's one of
Once a
these.
year.
So it's a great thing, and it's Geneva is a very well off town.
Sure.
So the fireworks are
Yeah.
impressive, and they're synchronized to music. And even when I lived there in the '80s, they were synchronized to music. So it was like
Right.
it was like a big deal. But I will say that the very very fond memories that I have is being with my dad and my younger brother Sean up on a mountain. There's a mountain just outside of Geneva called the Salève, and we would go camping up there in the summertime. And I just remember being up there and being able to watch the fireworks that were. So it's probably
From above them.
15 miles or 20 miles or whatever, but being able to see the fireworks from up there. It's all dark over the mountain. We're camping out. We go outside of the tent and watch the fireworks in the distance with my dad and brother.
Yeah, cool. Let's jump to the final segment. Oh, and for our listeners, I think we're going to choose... What was the second topic that we talked about? The failure kind of thing?
Yeah, 5.
Is that the topic? Or is it the fireworks? Maybe it's fireworks in Geneva. All right, for listeners, PM us the fireworks in Geneva, and that'll be your winning answer.
Nice.
The LoCo Experience is your craziest experience of your lifetime
All right.
that you're willing to share with our listeners.
In 1995,
Okay.
I was a freshman in college.
All right.
And between my freshman year and sophomore year in college, the summer in between.
All right.
And, as I already told you, I you can tell I have a bit of an adventurous streak in me, right?
For sure.
So I like to go places
No
and
boundaries.
do things. And so I recruited 2 of my friends, one from college and one friend of mine from high school. And we were going to drive from my house in Massachusetts all the way to Yellowstone National Park and back
Okay.
to start the summer.
Like for spring break. Oh, for summer.
For summer,
Okay.
because
Yep.
I didn't have a job lined up yet, and we all had like a couple weeks that we could do this, and we were 19 years old. It was like, oh, totally, let's go do this. And so there was 3 of us, me, Mark, and Sean, and we all get in this car. It was a red 1991 Ford Taurus.
Very nice.
Yeah, totally classy.
Only 4 years old, though.
Yeah, very good car, new car. And so we drove that, through, whatever, Massachusetts to Connecticut to Pennsylvania and
through Chicago,
through Illinois.
Yeah.
And, we kind of, everyone's taking turns driving. And we stopped in South Dakota
Okay.
and had some adventures and camped or whatever it was. And then we went to the next place, went to Wyoming. We went to Yellowstone. It was amazing. We went to the Badlands. We went to Devil's Thumb or Devil's Tower.
Yep.
All that's like super cool. And then
Plus, you were like all born and raised. Well, you were in Switzerland, so you
Yeah.
knew mountains and stuff. But everybody else was
it was,
probably
it was
like,
beautiful. It was super fun. It was super,
Yeah.
super fun. And we had a great time. And we were just like goofing off and, being 19-year-olds and having a great time. And we stayed in Yellowstone. And then we drove down into Jackson, Wyoming.
Yep.
Grand Teton National Park. We had this incredible adventure, like out there paddling on the lakes and all this sort of fun stuff. So super, super fun. And then we're going to turn around from there. We're going to go and drop my one friend off to see his girlfriend in like North Carolina, and then go back up to Massachusetts.
Okay.
And I didn't have a job lined up for the summer yet, right? So I was like, I'll figure it out when I get home.
Yep.
And we get to Jackson in early June, and there's help
the
wanted
Cowboy
signs.
Saloon is
There's like help wanted signs all over the place.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, help wanted, help wanted, help wanted. And I was like, it's pretty nice out here.
Right.
I'm help. I could be helpful.
I could be bothered.
I can figure this out. And so the craziest thing I'd ever done in my life to that point, which is still up there, is I called my parents. I said, I'm not coming home. I'm going to miss my brother's high school graduation.
Right.
I'm going to stay in Jackson. I'm going to find a job. And my friends are driving your car home.
I love it.
And so I stayed there. I found a job at the Jackson Hole Lodge where I was in charge of not even the housekeeping. I was the guy who was filling the closets and the carts for the housekeepers so that they could do their jobs. And I also worked at the pool on occasion, and I had a second job at the Jackson Hole Public Library restocking books, and I stayed there for 8 weeks, and that was my entire summer.
Yeah.
And then I got back. I returned from Jackson to Massachusetts to Boston on a Greyhound bus.
Nice.
It took 60 hours. And the only book I had with me is probably a book that you appreciate.
Yeah.
I read about a quarter of it, and I thought, this book sucks. Why does everybody like it?
It's not Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, is it?
It's worse. It's Atlas Shrugged.
I love that book.
I know.
I could read that book 3 times. In
Everybody
60 hours.
was like, this book is so great. And I'm reading this book, and I was like, oh my God, what a bunch of nonsense. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't keep reading the book. So I was like, I would rather stare out of the window for 40 hours than read this book. Anyway, take that, Ayn Rand.
So it goes.
So it goes.
Ayn Rand, I love you. I think you're awesome, despite some of your fallacies. And
So
Alex,
what'd you think of that story?
I think that was awesome.
Okay.
I think that was a great story. And Alex, why don't you talk to our listeners about like where to go register for the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit? Where to find your LinkedIn profile, whatever like that you want to do.
Wrapping up here.
Wrapping it up, yeah.
Anyone who's interested in the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit. So first of all, you're an entrepreneur of some form or fashion. You're building a business. You're in the trenches. You got blood on your knuckles. You're out there doing things,
Yep.
and you know there's got to be a better way.
dick.
You know there's got to be a better way,
Okay.
right? It doesn't have to be this hard.
Yeah.
I want you to come and check out the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit. It's an incredible community. It's an incredible experience. The website is consciousentrepreneur.us. On top of that, we have the podcast. We've got a YouTube channel. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So there's a lot of materials there.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very easy to tap into us and it's super rewarding.
Do you want to do something cool like half off your registration for the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit for like the first person that responds with a DM to our Insta page or something?
So let's give for the first person who does the fireworks in Geneva, let's give them,
Okay.
in addition to whatever you're going to give them,
yeah.
a half off discount code.
All right.
And I'll one-up you. I'll see you and one-up you, and we'll offer a $100 code off. The code is LoCo, LOCO, is the code for anyone who signs up for the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit before the end of March.
I dig it.
We'll get $100 off either the 1 day or the 2 day.
Thank you. That's very generous of you. I hit you out of the blue with that. We didn't talk about it before.
Let's do it.
Did I cover all your social handles and stuff like that?
LinkedIn is the best place to find me.
All right. Yeah. I hit one with the chat bot.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for being here. Drive safe back to Boulder, and I've enjoyed this conversation very much, and thank you.
Thanks for having me.